Hello, welcome to Cybersecurity Unlocked. If you are watching on YouTube, please don't forget to like and subscribe, leave a comment and let us know your thoughts. Really keen to hear everybody's feedback. I'm delighted to be joined by my good friend, Bruce Keeble. Bruce is a career digital forensic investigator. He spent the last 20 years in cyber consulting with prestigious outfits such as Grant Thornton, Booz Allen, and he is now the global head of cyber practice for Nortel. How are we doing? We got there in the end. Good to see you.
Yeah, thank you for the invitation today. Really excited to join you today.
Great, as are we. So let's kick things off. So how did you get started, Bruce? We're really keen to hear your story.
Well, I'll try and keep it short and concise. I mean, 20 years seems like an age to someone starting out in cyber. But I was a very young boy and I saw a program called Quincy, which was a detective program in the US. So I'm showing my age here, in the late 70s, I think it was out. And I always wanted to be a forensic scientist before the hot kind of topic of CSI Miami and it being very, I guess a field that most people were really excited to try and get into. So I became a UK Gov forensic scientist, working on counter-terrorism, murder investigations, digital crime as well. Some of the things I can't obviously discuss here publicly, but essentially I was fighting crime and working for the Criminal Prosecution Service. I was expert witness trained, and I had a bunch of skills that allowed me to go from the public sector and after about 8 years transition into the private sector. And before I really knew it, cyber's always been a thing. It just wasn't called cyber. And so I was actually doing digital forensics, and I started out in phone forensics and computer forensics before I started kind of getting into the weeds of what we now call DFIR, or digital forensics incident response.
Yeah, and that's a super hot market, one of the hottest markets that we sort of manage at the moment. And what is it that you think makes sort of a good consultant? What are the sort of key attributes that maybe even you look for when you're sort of hiring?
It's a combination. It depends on the level. But what I'm looking for, and certainly one of the skill sets I've learned, is to be a better listener. Mm-hmm. So you've got two ears and one mouth and use it in that proportion. Yeah. And it's a hard thing, particularly when people like me and others in the community are very passionate, very keen to share, you'll find in the community, to share their experiences, heavily anonymized, of course. Yeah. But it's about giving back to fight crime. And you'll see pockets of these attributes, whether they're kind of newly starting out or very experienced, that a lot of people started out in a law enforcement background. Or certainly they've seen the programs and they wanted to follow their path and try and get into the career of cyber. Cyber is very broad, as we know that with our kind of very mature clients and small to medium enterprises. Yeah. So it really depends. So the kind of attributes I'm looking for is, if they're new, they're young, be keen to learn new skills and not be kind of focused in one specific territory. Yeah. However, on the other perspective would be maybe if they like digital forensics, that's a good way to start out. Yeah. Focusing on phone forensics, understand about good practices for handling evidence and knowing how to approach an investigation the right way. And by obviously encompassing and looking to your peers, more seasoned professionals where you can learn from. Yeah. Okay. Responsiveness is key. Yeah. In my world anyway. Yeah. Because typically you've got a phone call on a Saturday night, so you're about to go out and you get the phone call on the red hotline, says, we've got a problem. Can you help? Yeah. Yeah. And as somebody who's sort of progressing their career through, like what I've sort of seen in consulting, particularly around sort of Big Four, the role becomes less about running the investigations and being sort of hands-on and then becoming more sort of a sales person and sort of, dealing with RFPs and then, being, doing the sort of advisory. What sort of advice would you give people that are looking to kind of make that sort of transition? Because as you rightly point out, a lot of people in the cyber world are very passionate about what it is that they're doing. And then to make that transition from, doing the investigations to then selling it. And does it need to be as fearful as people think? It depends on the organization you work for. I'm very much at the coalface, very much hands-on. Yeah. I will still go to client sites. Yeah. I'm still rolling up my sleeves, getting my hands dirty, helping leading, but also particularly when it's a stress situation. We may have a client who's losing £500,000 a day, could be US dollars in a different geography, different time zone. And so it's all hands at deck, trying to really help a client through their crisis,
Yeah.
helping stabilize and contain the situation and tell them it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
So for me, I may be a bit of a chimera. I'm sure, I'm not the only one,
Yeah.
but I'm very much at the coalface. Maybe not 40 hours a week, but I'm certainly there keeping abreast of new changes, new technologies, new approaches. But a lot of the fundamentals haven't changed. This goes back to my law enforcement days where evidence handling is key because you don't know if there's going to be litigation, disputes about the work that was performed, or sometimes I'm parachuted in to a burning platform where there's an incumbent MSSP. These things happen and you don't know what's going to happen downstream, months down the line, essentially.
Yeah, yeah. And with the and you mentioned being in the cold face of it, so you're seeing the market and the changes and the slowdown, which I guess is kind of upon us now. What do you see as the sort of key opportunities? It's obviously very difficult if you're kind of pigeonholed into kind of a financial services market where banking is clearly sort of slowed down this year and going through a bit of a sort of a transformation. What do you see as the opportunities in this market at the moment, and what give us some hope?
Well, I'm very opportunistic. I think you just touched upon financial services. So if we look at, you got DORA, NIS2, you got heavy regulations coming down the line in the next few years, the equivalent of the GDPR.
Yeah.
And that still exists now, as we know.
Yeah.
The other, I guess, change in sentiment in the ether, particularly with large enterprises and small to medium enterprises as well, is that there's a switch. Before COVID, it was very reactive, very knee-jerk. They understand the importance of, because the regulations are coming through, about being prepared. So as a practice, to not just focus on the reactive side of things, we very much have a very large practice on the preparedness, so the proactive side. So please forgive the analogy, but left and right of boom. Boom being the incidents, right being the aftermath, and getting the company back up and running, and remediation, restoration. But left, really, you want to really minimize the problem before it really lands. So a cyber attack, an insider threat, each business is unique. So our approach is always never take a cookie cutter approach because it may be not fit for purpose. So preparedness. So the things that we help our clients with on the global scale is very much tabletop crisis simulations, cyber exercises, particularly with the large enterprise type clients. But one of the other things that we do as well, which is not necessarily unique, but not many people do that, is that we have something called a digital twin or cyber range. And what that allows us to do is emulate a very large enterprise environment so that the kind of internal IT teams, it could be the board, it could be key stakeholders, can simulate the impact of something happening in the environment without turning anything off and on, without impacting physically of a server going down or the email going down. Last thing you want to do is impact day-to-day operations legitimately. So we do it in a safe environment. Again, it's not something you can do in a week, but certainly we see the big to the small really being on top of, we need to be prepared. What does good look like? And actually, maybe we are quite good, but how do you get to that kind of A-star level in terms of like an exam, in terms of getting to that next level of maturity? So there's something for everyone. And again, we're all very aware that I think the economy globally is being impacted. We've seen things like Move It, other supply chain type issues impacting the large and the small.
And from a cyber perspective, what do you see as the industries that are kind of still relatively busy at the moment in this market?
I think all sectors are very busy. I think what's changed is the budget and the risk appetites and the awareness. I think the last kind of, since COVID, people were very aware of the increasing risks to businesses, how the impact by not being able to work for a week because of maybe a small crisis or a cyber crisis, or what we used to see as ransomware attacks. And I guess what I'm seeing at the moment is a slight subtle change in certain threat actor groups, which is dictating that. So before you had the old model of, steal, encrypt, extort. The threat actors, typically, not all of them, are missing out the encryption bit. They're stealing the data and going straight to the extortion phase.
Right. Do you still see that as the biggest kind of threat is ransomware attacks?
I think it's a mixture. The things that I'm seeing, and again, this goes back many years, I'm still seeing insider threat, supply chain risks, third-party risk management. And there's a key thing that I want to raise here, and I guess people in the community, the incident responders out there will understand this, is fatigue and burnout.
Yeah.
So if you're on a SOC, you've got this constant barrage of alerts, and we're all human. Then on the other aspect is that you've got if it's a crisis and it's severe, where it's impacted the business, where business operations are brought to a standstill, we're seeing the internal teams being burnt out. So if I'm parachuted in to support an internal team, or if I'm on the vendor or panel list for a cyber insurance company, I always make a beeline to take 30 seconds, a minute to say, how's the team doing?
Yeah.
I'm not here to point fingers. You're here to add the kind of gravitas and experience and to be one team. And that means looking after each other. And it's the people that haven't slept. Typically, I've been there as well, for the first 36 hours, there's a very lack of sleep that goes on. And so also you want to make sure the communication within the teams are kind of key. And this may be looping back to one of your earlier questions about some of the characteristics. It's listening, good communication. And again, if it's something you can't do, you're having troubles with, don't suffer. Share it with the team. No one's a martyr here, and it's a team sport.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's why you have a lot of ex-military kind of, sort of pivot into the cybersecurity industry. They're kind of, very resilient, robust, sort of characters. They've been there, seen it, done it, and that I guess they make for very good, SOC analysts and whatnot. So that's interesting. That digital twin thing is fascinating. What's your approach now? Managing sort of a global sort of portfolio. What are the sort of the tactics or your strategy to breaking into sort of new territories? Obviously, UK, Europe is kind of your home, but breaking into the Middle East, breaking into the US. What's your sort of approach?
Well, I've been very fortunate. My career has kind of given me, I guess, the experiences of being kind of boots on the ground. So there's an element of having lived a little, should I say, for work, if you want to call it there. So again, I've not been to every geography, but I think for me, new territories physically has its own nuances, because if you're centralized, say from the UK, you have to have a follow the sun model. At some point, you need to rest. You need good communication. You need technical teams, and you also need the right kind of coverage across those different geographies. If we look at even close to home with Europe, if we're looking at, we got several offices in Germany, several offices in the Nordics. They're not my kind of second or third languages, so I'm relying on technical specialists who may not necessarily be digital forensic or incident responders, but they're very tech savvy. They go in DevOps, for example, who get it. So they can understand the mechanisms that may be needed remotely. Also, you need specialist teams who can carry that experience in each of those geographies to really maximize that support mechanism that's needed. But fast forwarding, again, this comes back to my kind of being prepared. You don't need that kind of bat phone or the red phone or hotline to kind of go off. Typically some of these types of engagements will be kind of a roadmap to cyber maturity, improving their risk posture, or understanding a gap analysis. So quite often you can plan in advance. So the model that we have is typically, we'd have staff who are very experienced, but where needed, we can probably bring in our associate model, where we have kind of key personnel who could be assigned for a 2-year project. So the kind of work we do is for military, governments, as trusted advisors. And these aren't kind of 1 week type engagements, which incident response typically entails.
Okay. No, that's interesting. And what would you say are the impacts and sort of opportunities around AI for people that aren't kind of up to speed with AI and the impacts on cyber? What do you see as the biggest impacts and opportunities?
I think there's a couple of things here. AI, I remember again being a child watching Terminator 2, and it was the advance of AI and robots. I mean, we're not quite there yet, but we've seen the newspaper cuttings about how AI and technology will be very kind of cutting edge and changing mankind's future for the better. controlled in the right way. I think we've seen it with electronic disclosure and discovery, where you've seen target assisted reviews and sentiment analysis. There's been that kind of AI technology kind of creeping in. I know we're kind of focusing more on cyber, but I think for practitioners in the kind of incident response world, the SOC, the kind of in-house InfoSec security teams would be probably automation, spotting those patterns before a human, as seasoned as they are, can spot them, because you're trying to reduce that error, that time, fatigue, error. And again, the kind of the burnout that happens with high-performing teams. And is a very difficult thing to manage and balance, because you'll find whether they're young, new, old and seasoned, forgive the old, but what I mean is mature, and they've been in very mature environments. We're all human, we make mistakes. So I think AI will help automation in the cybersecurity community to help spot potential threats before really they start causing concern in a victim organization or a mature entity.
Yeah. And what do you think are staying with the cyber threat side, what do you think are the kind of the biggest threats that we face, in 2023, 2024?
I think the theory I've mentioned earlier on, but I think it's probably fatigue and burnout. When I say fatigue, I'm probably talking about someone who's probably in a mid-sized entity who has sole responsibility for approving someone's access to somewhere on the SharePoint or not. Quite often the threat actors take advantage of MFA fatigue by just bombarding you with illegitimate kind of alerting, where the person receiving it goes, "Oh, I'm busy, I'll just accept yes."
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it does happen. I think supply chain is a big issue and will continue to be. Something which is close to my heart isn't just the large enterprises. It's very much the small to medium enterprises, not just in the UK, but globally. They're the lifeblood, I feel, of communities, families, people trying to earn a living. And some of these businesses have been around 20, 30, 40 years. They may not have the big budgets or the big tech stacks or an incident response retainer, or necessarily know that anything's wrong. So I think the threats are aimed at the SME levels. And one thing that I'm seeing the last kind of 6 months is not just a change in the threat actors, it's their approach to be, it seems to go in peaks and troughs, depending on what's available, the kind of types of malware, types of vulnerabilities that are out there. But certainly, I think web shell type approaches. So they're attacking web servers which are publicly facing. And if there's a vulnerability there, if things aren't patched, or if there's not kind of eyes on that kind of system where it's locked down enough, it allows like a kind of entry level to the threat actor to try and exploit, kind of traverse across the environment, escalate privilege, and all these other bad things that happen. And unfortunately, the ones which are succumbing to this are the SME markets.
Yeah.
Again, they're key to the awareness of vulnerabilities. They may not necessarily understand the full ins and outs of regulatory pressures until typically they face it for the first time and they realise how impactful that can be negatively on them.
So the ones that are just, I guess, sort of underprepared or under-resourced, essentially, are the ones that are sort of vulnerable. So I guess with that, I guess that's potentially an opportunity for consulting firms to maybe offer some sort of off-the-shelf package, or I guess like you say, that whenever there's potential gaps or vulnerabilities, opportunities can open up.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, great. And after such a stellar career as you've had, what other sort of career aspirations do you have, Bruce?
I'm still a crime fighter at heart. I know people go, you're on the corporate side, you're a consultant. People don't see the long hours, the constant kind of training, the kind of being on the ball. I've not seen the tech stacks evolve and change as quickly as they have prior to the last 5 years. I mean, it is very kind of slow and methodical, but with kind of cloud services, it's being on top of, I guess, the changes in the tech stack. I think for me, one of the things I try to do is give back to the community. So I guest lecture, prior to COVID, I used to guest lecture in my own time to universities to kind of maybe share some very highly anonymized war stories I've done my own mini tabletops with different kind of universities as well, so that people understand and experience what a cyber crisis could mean with some kind of made up scenarios and some key government figures. And I'm placing someone who's 20 years old, who's seen a lot of bad things in the newspapers, suddenly being the CEO of a mid-sized company, and it makes or break, depending on the decision, the outcome of that the well-being of that victim organisation. I think the thing I also do in my own time is I'm an ambassador to the UK Cyber Helpline. We're growing. I'll do that in my own time as well. And we're funding the approach to support victims of crime, where it's not quite in the criminal and it kind of falls in the gap between that civil arena as well. So the work that we do, we're actually growing in the US. We're establishing the charity. So it's a charity as well.
Great.
And I think we've helped over 30,000 potential victims of crime. A lot of it is done through goodwill. It's from a range of seasoned technologists who've got deep and vast experience like myself. But we also have a volunteer mechanism where people at university, finishing university, get a chance to get some exposure to the elements of, I guess, the forensic hygiene that's needed to a cyber crisis or a cyber crime. Again, that may be a good way in. And certainly, if any of your viewers want to kind of connect afterwards for you or me, happy to have another conversation, because we find a lot of our volunteers are coming from university who are getting that free exposure. They get exposed to kind of good ways of doing things, good practices.
Right.
Again, they have to be kind of vetted and cleared, because we could be dealing with things which are very sensitive to a victim.
Okay.
So the work there with the charity is probably a good way in if you're starting out in your career, or if you're somewhere in the midpoint or coming towards the end of your career. We get a lot of volunteers who are keen, again, in the community to share that expertise, to share their insights, to share good practices and approaches to kind of fighting crime in the digital world.
Okay, amazing. Yeah, we'll put a link in the description on that one. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing that, Bruce. And thank you so much for your precious time. It's really good to connect and catch up. And the best of luck for the years ahead. Thanks to everybody for listening. Please like and subscribe.